That's not going to work. So I was having a moment with my daughter a few moments ago, and she's 7 years old, and I'm sure you recognize that your kids pay attention and they're listening and they're observing and they're picking up on things. And with all the tension in our country right now, and all the all the fear and tension and division portrayed on television, either fictionally or through news, the media, if kids are exposed to it at all, they feel it and they see it. And honestly, you're exposed to it just by being around. So I was having one of those moments with my 7-year-old daughter that I just found really fascinating, and I found that I learned something from. And those are the kind of moments that come and go all the time in our lives, and I just thought it'd be nice to share one. So she's bringing up questions. She's bringing up questions about politics, and she's bringing up questions about people's perspectives and their choices, and why people choose this candidate and why people choose that candidate, and why do people seem angry, and is this one right? Is that one right? Which one's really right? Just the curiosity of a child. And I I find that I get to work with a lot of families and a lot of children in private practice, and what I've learned through that almost more than any place is just the wisdom of a child. You know, what I notice in that space is that a lot of parents, a lot of adults want to teach their children how to be like them. They want to teach they're basically, rather than allowing the child to be and to express the honest emotion of their body, or to express the honest perception. That doesn't mean you don't lead. It doesn't mean you don't correct. It doesn't mean you don't teach. It means rather than allowing the child to simply be honest and to express openly, we selectively restrict their emotions. We selectively restrict their perception. We selectively punish and support the way that they articulate certain things based upon our injuries, our fears, our biases, our knowledge, and yes, our wisdom and our perspective. But proportionally, it's not just wisdom. It's, basically, as injured adults, we tend to react to emotionally and intellectually. Spiritually, we react to children based upon our injuries and our perspectives, our ideas. And it doesn't have to be all good or bad. It's, there's a proportion in there. But coming back to the thought, I was so fascinated listening to my daughter and the way she's asking questions about this particular moment. And obviously, they feel that energy leading up to this moment. And you can have the television on mute, and you can see people barking at each other, and you can see and feel what's being told here. And you can hear the stories that are being told and how they're being told, and the reality that we're creating and that we're co-creating. We're being fed a narrative, and then we selectively attend to that narrative, and we decide what part of that narrative we agree with, and we take on certain roles, and we take on certain perspectives and certain biases, and pretty soon we're we're pissed off and we're angry and we're going to blame it on someone. We're going to find someone to blame. So listening to her ask these questions and it was being really trying to be thoughtful, but stumbling and trying to be thoughtful about how do you use words, how do you use language to explain something to a 7-year-old like respect. Obviously, teach respect through behavior, through attitude, and by aligning that with the language. But when you're defining respect in an abstract context, like politics or like selecting a presidential candidate, or, why does grandma think this way and why does mommy think this way, and, why does daddy think this way? So I was stumbling through metaphors and thoughts and perspectives, talking about things like tolerance, talking about things like respect, talking about things like patience. And I found myself defining kind of the underlying emotion, if you will, or the value behind political perspectives, or behind maybe the underlying values that we are all, actually what allows us, we're floating on this almost unseen sea of interconnected values. We have a shared reality that we've created. We have a shared reality, and that shared reality comes with certain ideas and certain values, and we align in some places more than others, but there are certain core values that most people adhere to that allow this thing to even possibly work. Like honesty, like respect. What we've seen in this past 4 years, and please, I'm not about to take sides, so I'm not going there, but what we've seen enhanced and magnified, let's say, in the past 4 years is this tendency to do whatever is possible to manipulate reality, do whatever is possible to align with a given perspective, regardless of the values inherent. It's, lie, cheat, and steal, manipulate. I'm not naive. That stuff has always taken place. Now it's just profoundly normalized and magnified, and it's palpable. We're all feeling it. We're all fatigued by it. We're anxious. We're tired. People are fearful. People are angry. Anytime you see all these emotions, this is an acting out. It's an acting out. It's an expression of injury. It's an expression of fatigue. It's an expression of fear. It's an expression of, oh no, what's happening here? We need to take sides. And I'm reeling myself back in a little bit. So I found myself talking to my 7-year-old about this and trying to define to her how I perceive politics, or how I perceive the process of it, the value of it. And I was telling her how about this concept of tolerance, that I thought tolerance was one of the core values that is needed for this thing to work. The idea that you can think that way and I can think this way, and I was explaining empathy to her, and just getting into empathy, and basically saying, I care about your point of view, you care about my point of view, I care about how you see the world, you care about how I see the world. And there's a willingness to respect that you have lived a life and had a journey that for some reason finds you seeing the world in that way. And I've lived a life and I've had a journey that for some reason finds me seeing the world in the way that I see it. And for whatever reason, this is how I've always thought my whole life, and I've been increasingly aware of that. Just that I've always been profoundly curious about how people see the world and the stories they're telling and why they tell those stories and why they see the world the way they see it. How do people perceive, and how does that influence how they act, and how does that influence, the choices they make, and their politics and all that. So these past 4 years, I've spent a massive amount of time just really looking into people, particularly looking at ideas that I don't understand or I don't respect or I don't support or, I perceive are inherently flawed or inherently foolish, inherently hurtful, inherently harmful. And just recognizing that I can genuinely see how people can have a completely and totally different perspective than I do, and understand how they might arrive at that perspective, and I may genuinely not agree with it. And I need to understand where I put my boundaries in there. To what degree do I set boundaries? At what point am I going to resist more than others? And for me anyway, going to the point of doing real harm, going to the point where I would physically harm another human being, I think in my ethos and my perspective, and then this could be tested, but it's to respond in a protective or a defensive way.
Can we play Duck Duck Goose?
Yes, we can. I'm being called upon to play Duck Duck Goose, so I'm going to wrap this up before I go too far off the rails. The point is, I recognize that there are people on the left who think everybody on the right is just totally flawed. And there's a lot of people on the right that think everybody on the left is totally flawed. To the point where people are starting to be willing to really hurt each other. To hurt each other for a whole lot of attachments and ideas and perspectives that have been fed to them that... And let me be careful, because I don't want to sound like I'm speaking negatively or speaking down. It's to recognize for all of us that we are constantly buying into a version of reality that we're being told, and that we're being sold, and that we're being given, that we're being fed. And we all have a responsibility, I believe, to decide to what extent we're going to buy into these things and become attached to these things and be driven by these things and be told what to do by these things and live in fear by these things and become divided by these things. Because the reality, we're not divided. The reality is separation and division and fear is the best way to manipulate people. It's the best way to control people. It's how people have been controlled and manipulated for thousands of years. But now we do find ourselves in a place where if we're willing to be critical, if we're willing to be honest, if we're willing to be open, we have a whole lot of information at our fingertips, and we have a whole lot of wisdom at our fingertips. And we have the ability to share honestly, which is all that I'm doing right now, is just sharing my honest perception in this moment. Just a person sharing an honest perception. And a profound value that I have is, rather than looking at other people and saying, you're wrong, I'm right, you should listen to my perspective, you should be in my tribe, I'm very curious to say, hey, what has life taught you? Why do you see the world the way you see it? Tell me about your story. Tell me why you see the world the way you do. Even if I don't come into alignment with you, that doesn't mean I can't find value in why you see the world the way you see it. And so I'm trying to define this to my 7-year-old, and, finding myself using the most basic language to express that I care about other people's point of view, and I want to understand other people's point of view. And that, to me, that's a very, very important value to have in any family, in any community, in any democracy, in whatever it is, in any company, in any community. It's, hey man, I have the integrity to tell you when I disagree with you or to stand my ground, but I also have the integrity to understand that you've lived a life and you have the right to your opinion and you have the right to your perception and you have the right to your ideas. And the moment I am willing to harm you or you are willing to harm me because I'm not willing to go into alignment with your ideas is the moment we're no longer a healthy family. We're no longer a healthy community. We're no longer a healthy democracy. It's really basic when you think about it. You know? How do we treat each other with love and respect and kindness in our families, with our best friends? I care about your perspective. You care about my perspective. I understand you've spent a lifetime arriving at your perspective. I've spent a lifetime arriving at my perspective. And what I see all around me when I'm not looking at the media in my community is a whole bunch of people looking at each other and smiling and saying, how are you doing? How are you doing in this time? Can I help you? Can I be there for you? And if you're not doing that, or if you're not seeing that in your community, what a nice thing to share. What a nice thing to show. What a nice thing to give. How are you doing? So I know that was a long tangential way to express that. But I think what I really wanted to say through it all was, rather than imposing our ideas upon children, rather than telling children how to see the world, or which of their feelings are okay to feel and which ones they should suppress and deny out of fear or shame because we're projecting it upon them, I'm blown away by how much I'm learning from my daughters. I'm blown away by how much I learn from the children I work with in private practice. To listen to their honest questions, to listen to their honest emotions that are coming out of their body, and just to understand that they are having an honest interaction with the present moment that is not filtered by all the biases that filter us or that get in the way of us, that we struggle with, that are finding us ready to hurt each other, ready to harm each other because we've been stirred up, because we've been poked and we've been prodded and we've been convinced that we're separate. Whether you believe in God, whether you believe in a higher power, whether you believe in none of that, when you close your eyes and you quiet your mind and you listen to your breath and you find that quiet space within, what you feel is that we're all interconnected. We're all part of the same thing. I can feel the sensations in my body and assume I can empathize with the sensations in your body. I recognize that we create ideas to approximate reality, but those ideas should never replace what comes from the heart. Those ideas should never replace the profound interconnectedness that we all share, and that interconnectedness is what keeps us afloat, that keeps us going together. To recognize that when we make ourselves fearful and ignorant and we attach our identity, our ego, to ideas, to political perspectives and tribes and brand names, and it makes us easy to manipulate. It makes it easy to separate us. It makes it easy to manipulate us. It makes it easy to profit off of us. It makes it easy to consume off of us. That's what I see. That's what I feel. That's what this life has taught me. That's what the journey of my life has been telling me and showing me is I got to do the work in here. I got to do the work in here first. I got to take a good look in the mirror every day and ask myself if I'm being honest. Ask myself if I'm having, if I can live from that common value, just that common value of, hey man, I care about your point of view. I care about what journey you've had in this life and how that influences how you see the world. And I can appreciate how that journey has found its way into the ideas that you see the world through and that you speak from, and why it influences your attitude and your choices. And if you ever want to hear my story, I'm happy to tell it, but you don't have to hear it, and that's cool too. So these are the lessons that become more profound talking to a child, learning from a child, just listening to her and recognizing how to express that to her and what it means to her, and how to use language that allows her to understand these things that we're all navigating and we're all getting wrapped up in. We're all sitting on the couch right now just looking at the numbers coming out of 4 states, wondering what's going to happen, wondering how it's going to influence our life, wondering, acting like we're at the mercy of it all, believing we're at the mercy of it all, somehow buying into the idea that we're all at the mercy of it all, rather than we are all creating it. We're all part of creating it. Yes, there are entities of power that want to influence us and want us to buy into ideas and want us to be separated and take sides and consume. But we have a responsibility in there. We have the ability to recognize the attachment of it, the story of it. I'm going to leave it there, man. Time to go play Jenga. I hope you all have a really wonderful night. Thank you for letting me ramble at you for a little bit. This is Dr. Mark Jesenowski. I do the Wizard Podcast. Have a wonderful night. Take care.